That particular day when my stepbrother crossed a boundary I never anticipated we would reach transformed into the most thrilling and unforgettable experience of my life. Even now, every detail remains vividly imprinted in my memory as if it occurred just yesterday. It was a Saturday afternoon, and sunlight streamed through the partially drawn blinds, casting a gentle, warm glow on the wooden countertops. I was seated at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone while the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the background. It had been a leisurely day, with my father and his new wife, Melissa, out visiting friends, leaving me alone in the house with my stepbrother, Caleb. Caleb and I had never been particularly close, despite sharing the same roof for the past 2 years. We had always maintained a certain distance. It wasn't that we disliked each other, but rather that we simply did not connect. He was the extroverted type, often surrounded by friends, while I preferred solitude. However, recently, there seemed to be a shift in our dynamic. I could not quite identify it, but there was a palpable tension, an unusual energy that lingered whenever we were together. I glanced up from my phone as Caleb entered the kitchen, dressed in a loose-fitting tank top and gray sweatpants, his dark hair still damp from a shower. He exuded a natural confidence that I had always admired, but today, there was an added softness in his expression, a quietness that felt out of character. "Hey," he said, reaching for a glass from the cabinet. His tone was casual, yet there was a gravity to it that made me hesitate. "Hey," I responded, putting my phone down. "What's up?" He shrugged, filling the glass with water from the tap. "Not much, just needed a break from my room. It's too quiet in there." I nodded, observing as he leaned against the counter, sipping his water. There was something about his relaxed demeanor that caused my heart to race, and I quickly averted my gaze, hoping he had not noticed my lingering stare. "Where's Melissa and Dad?" he inquired, breaking the silence. "Still out." I responded that they had mentioned they would return late. Caleb nodded, a slight smile forming on his lips. "So, it's just the two of us, then?" he inquired. "Yes," I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. For a brief moment, silence enveloped us, thick and heavy yet not uncomfortable, as if we were both anticipating something, though neither of us could articulate what it was. Caleb placed his glass on the counter and approached the table, pulling out a chair to sit across from me. Our eyes locked, and I experienced an unexpected surge of electricity. It was not the first time I had felt this sensation, but it was the first time I could not dismiss it. "You've been acting a bit strange lately," he remarked, his tone light yet inquisitive. I frowned, taken aback. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, reclining in his chair. "I don't know, you seem quieter than usual, and you avoid me sometimes." "I'm not avoiding you," I replied hastily, though the words felt insincere even as I spoke them. Caleb raised an eyebrow, a playful smile dancing at the corners of his mouth. "Really? Because it certainly feels that way." I opened my mouth to protest, but the reality was that he was not entirely mistaken. I had indeed been keeping my distance. I was unsure of the reason, perhaps it was the way his presence filled the room or how my heart raced in his company. Whatever the cause, it frightened me, and the simplest way to cope was to steer clear of him altogether. "I've just been busy," I finally said, though we both recognized it was not a convincing excuse. "Busy doing what?" he asked, his tone teasing but his gaze earnest. I shrugged, casting my eyes down to the table. "Stuff." Caleb chuckled softly, the sound warm and inviting. "You're not very good at lying, you know." A flush crept up my neck and into my cheeks. "I'm not lying." "Sure," he replied, his smile broadening. "Whatever you say." There was a pause, and when I looked up, Caleb was still observing me, his eyes searching mine. The intensity of his gaze made my stomach flutter, prompting me to quickly avert my eyes, focusing instead on the grain of the wooden table. "You don't have to be so nervous." After a brief pause, he spoke, his voice now softer. "I'm not nervous," I lied, though my trembling hands revealed the truth. "Okay," he replied, his tone gentle yet skeptical. He rose from his seat, approached the refrigerator, and retrieved a soda. "Want one?" he inquired, holding it up. "Sure," I responded, appreciating the diversion. He tossed the can to me, and I caught it awkwardly, the chill of the metal sending a shiver through my fingers. Caleb opened his own can and took a long sip, leaning against the counter while observing me. I could feel his gaze, and it required all my strength not to fidget under it. Then he set his can down and asked, "What's really going on?" His tone and expression suggested he was aware of something I was not. I hesitated, uncertain of how to respond. The truth was, I was confused. All I sensed was a change in our dynamic, and it frightened me. "I don't know," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb's playful demeanor shifted as he frowned. "Hey," he said gently, "it's okay. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." I nodded, thankful for his compassion, yet even as I sipped my soda and avoided his gaze, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had altered between us. Caleb refrained from pressing the issue further, although his gaze lingered a bit longer than usual. He leaned against the counter, his soda can resting in his hand, his eyes lost in thought as he stared into space. I sensed a subtle but undeniable shift in the atmosphere. While we had shared quiet moments before, this one felt distinctly charged. As if the silence was attempting to convey something unspoken. Finally, Caleb broke the stillness, asking, "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." I laughed, relieved by the change in topic. "I don't know, Melissa left some things in the fridge. We could make something together," he suggested, raising an eyebrow playfully. There was an underlying tension, something unexpressed that caused my chest to constrict. "Sure," I replied, rising and making my way to the refrigerator. I opened the door and glanced inside, searching the shelves for ideas. "We have chicken and some vegetables, perhaps we can prepare a stir-fry." Caleb nodded, placing his soda on the counter. "Sounds good to me." I retrieved the ingredients and placed them on the counter, while Caleb fetched a cutting board and a knife. We worked in a comfortable silence, the sound of chopping vegetables resonating in the room. It felt surprisingly normal. For the first time in weeks, the tension between us seemed to dissipate, replaced by a quiet camaraderie that I hadn't realized I had missed. After a while, Caleb broke the silence. "Can you hand me that pepper?" he asked, his voice interrupting the rhythm of our task. "Sure," I replied, reaching for the vibrant red bell pepper on the counter. However, as I turned to pass it to him, my foot slipped on a stray piece of carrot that had fallen to the floor. I stumbled, and Caleb's hand instinctively shot out to steady me, his fingers gripping my arm firmly. "Careful," he cautioned, his voice calm and steady. "I'm fine," I responded quickly, though my heart raced for reasons unrelated to my near fall. His hand lingered on my arm a moment longer than necessary before he released it, and I felt the absence of his touch like a physical ache. "Perhaps we should add, clean as you go, to the list," Caleb joked, his familiar playful grin returning. "Maybe," I muttered, turning back to the cutting board and concentrating intently on slicing the pepper. Yet, my hands trembled, and I sensed Caleb's gaze on me, observing and waiting. "You're quiet again," he remarked after a moment. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "Nothing," I replied too quickly. Caleb chuckled softly. "You're a terrible liar, you know that." I remained silent, focusing on the vegetables before me, but Caleb was determined not to let it slide this time. He set his knife down and moved to stand beside me, his presence warm. An overwhelming sense of anticipation filled the air. I could feel it, and I sensed he did too. "Hey," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Look at me." I hesitated, my grip on the knife tightening, but ultimately, I set it down and turned to face him, our eyes locking. There was a depth in his gaze, something serious and probing that caused my breath to hitch. "You don't have to keep everything bottled up," he said, his tone gentle yet firm. "You can talk to me." I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. I yearned to share my feelings. To articulate the confusing whirlwind of emotions that had been building within me for weeks. But how could I? How could I convey something I did not fully comprehend myself? It's nothing, I replied again, though my voice faltered on the last word. Caleb frowned, his brows furrowing in concern. It doesn't seem like nothing, he countered. It's just. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Things feel different lately between us. Caleb did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing lightly against mine where it rested on the counter. The contact was fleeting, barely more than a whisper, yet it sent a surge of electricity through me. They do, he confessed quietly, and I don't know what to do with that. His honesty took me by surprise, leaving me momentarily speechless. For so long, I had believed I was the only one experiencing this, the only one wrestling with the unspoken tension that lingered between us. But hearing him articulate it made me realize I was not alone in this struggle. What if we did nothing? I asked, my voice trembling. What if we just ignored it? Caleb's lips formed a small, sorrowful smile. Do you think we can? He replied. I remained silent, uncertain of how to answer. Ignoring it seemed simpler, safer, yet the way Caleb was looking at me, his eyes dark and intent, made it clear that pretending was no longer an option. The tension between us was tangible, something we could not dismiss or hide away, it was real and intensifying with each passing moment. I finally spoke, though the word felt insubstantial. Caleb moved closer, his presence causing my heart to race. What if we chose not to ignore it? His question lingered heavily in the air between us, charged with unspoken tension. I found myself unable to look away, paralyzed, breathless. The room seemed to shrink, the distance between us diminishing until only he remained, his essence permeating every thought in my mind. I don't know, I whispered, my voice barely rising above a murmur. Caleb's expression softened as he reached out once more, his fingers lightly brushing against mine. This time, I did not withdraw, I could not. His touch was grounding, stabilizing, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It's okay, he said gently. We don't need to have all the answers right now. I nodded, my throat constricted with emotion. For a brief moment, we stood in silence, the soft ticking of the kitchen clock providing a backdrop to our shared stillness. Caleb's hand remained on mine, warm and reassuring, and I experienced an unexpected tranquility. Whatever was unfolding between us did not require immediate resolution, we could navigate it one moment at a time. I could still feel the lingering warmth of his hand where it had rested on mine. It was a simple gesture, yet it spread through me like fire beneath my skin. We turned our attention back to the food, attempting to maintain a facade of normalcy. Caleb resumed chopping vegetables while I reached for the skillet, placing it on the stove and adjusting the heat to medium. The rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board filled the room, oddly comforting, yet the silence between us felt anything but. Each movement, each glance, carried a weight that had not existed before, and I sensed a shift in the air. You're staring, Caleb remarked suddenly, without lifting his gaze from the cutting board. I flinched, warmth flooding my cheeks. I'm not, I replied quickly, though my tone lacked conviction. He smirked, glancing up at me. You are. I found myself at a loss for words. He was correct, I had indeed been watching him. I was captivated by the fluidity of his hands as they moved with practiced skill, the sharp sound of the blade striking the cutting board was oddly mesmerizing, leaving me in a state of unease. Well, you're in my way, I remarked, reaching around him to retrieve the olive oil. The excuse felt inadequate, yet it was the best I could muster. Caleb remained unmoved, standing resolutely in my path, his teasing grin directed at me as he looked down. Am I? He asked. My response was firmer this time, yes. I stepped closer, determined to slip past him, but the proximity was more intimate than I anticipated. I halted, suddenly acutely aware of how close we were, the countertop pressing against my side, with Caleb almost brushing against me. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of soap and cologne enveloping me, and my heart raced so loudly that I feared he could hear it. He did not shift, his gaze locked onto mine, and for a fleeting moment, the playful grin vanished. His eyes searched mine, and the atmosphere between us thickened. My breath caught, my mind racing for words, yet none came. "Jake," he said softly, his voice low and steady, "why are we like this?" I blinked, taken aback by his inquiry. "Like what?" I asked. He gestured between us. "It feels as if there's something here, something we're both too afraid to articulate." His words struck me like a blow. He was right. There had been an undeniable tension building between us for weeks, but hearing him voice it made it all the more tangible, and I was at a loss for how to respond. "I don't know what you mean," I replied, though my voice trembled, a blatant falsehood we both recognized. Caleb sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, you do." The skillet on the stove began to sizzle as the oil heated, but neither of us moved to address it. The world around us faded, leaving just the two of us in the charged silence of the kitchen. "Caleb," I began, but he interrupted me. He softly urged, "Don't try to pretend this isn't happening." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words faltered as he stepped closer, his gaze fixed on mine. My back pressed against the counter, and I realized too late that I had no escape. Although he wasn't physically touching, his presence was suffocating, making it difficult to breathe. Then he asked, "You feel it too, don't you?" His voice was barely a whisper. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," he insisted, his tone firm yet gentle. "You're just scared." He was right. Fear coursed through me, fear of what this meant, fear of the consequences of crossing that line, fear of my racing heart and chaotic thoughts. But more than anything, I was afraid of how much I desired this, how much I desired him. I began, but my voice faded. Caleb hesitated for a moment before gently brushing his fingers against my cheek. The touch was soft and tentative, sending a jolt of electricity through me. My breath caught as I gazed up at him, frozen and unable to think. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't have to say anything." Then, before I could intervene or stop myself, he leaned in. The kiss began gently, a soft press of lips that felt more like a question than a statement. My mind screamed for me to stop, to push him away, to declare this was wrong, but my body betrayed me. I leaned into him, gripping the edge of the counter for support as the world around me shifted. Caleb's hand moved to my jaw, tilting my head slightly to deepen the kiss. I let out a soft, involuntary sound, which seemed to encourage him. The kiss intensified, becoming more urgent and insistent. His other hand found my hip, pulling me closer, and I felt my resolve disintegrate. It was chaotic and overwhelming, a whirlwind of emotions and sensations that left me breathless. I was lost, unsure of what I was doing or how to process the intensity of it all. I was indifferent to everything else, all that mattered was him. The warmth of his touch, the pressure of his lips, and the way he ignited a fire within me consumed my thoughts. When we finally separated, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against one another as we attempted to regain our composure. My hands clutched the counter, knuckles turning white, and I felt as though I might collapse if I released my grip. "What are we doing?" I whispered, my voice trembling, unaware that this was merely the beginning. Caleb smiled, his thumb gently caressing my cheek. "I don't know," he confessed, "but it feels right." His words enveloped me in warmth, and for the first time, the tension in my chest began to dissipate. Perhaps he was correct, perhaps this was not something we needed to resolve immediately. Perhaps it was sufficient to simply experience the moment. Yet, as I gazed into his eyes, a persistent voice in my mind reminded me that this was not straightforward, that we could not disregard or pretend this did not matter. We had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back, leaving me uncertain of what that entailed. Caleb's hand remained on my cheek, his gentle touch anchoring me as I struggled to comprehend the whirlwind of emotions within me. My heart raced, my thoughts spiraled. But for the first time, I did not wish to flee from it. I did not want to escape from him. "You're overthinking," Caleb said softly, his voice drawing me back to the present. A faint smile played on his lips as his hand moved from my cheek to rest on the counter beside me. "Stop thinking." "I can't help it," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is insane." He chuckled, a warm sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Maybe it is, but does it feel wrong?" I hesitated, my gaze falling to the space between us. The truth was, it did not feel wrong. It should have, but it didn't. Being this close to him, feeling his warmth and touch, was terrifying, exhilarating, and overwhelming, but not wrong. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to." Caleb nodded, his expression softening. "That's all right," he said gently. "You don't have to figure it out right now." His words acted as a balm to the anxiety that was clawing at my chest, and I found myself leaning into his touch as his hand moved to my waist. It was a small gesture, subtle yet grounding, making me feel as though I wasn't completely losing control. "We should stop," I said, though the words felt empty even as I uttered them. Caleb tilted his head, his eyes searching mine. "Do you want me to stop?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to assert that this was wrong and that we couldn't continue down this path, but the words failed to materialize. Instead, I shook my head, my breath hitching as his hand tightened slightly on my waist. "That's what I thought," he murmured, his voice low and almost teasing. The moment hung between us, fragile and electric, as if the entire world had narrowed down to this one room and this one decision. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to create distance before it was too late, but my body refused to comply. I was rooted in place, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He leaned in again, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was softer this time, slower, as if he were giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands moving to his shoulders as I surrendered to the magnetic pull between us. The kiss deepened, and I felt his hands slide to my lower back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. My head was spinning, my thoughts a chaotic jumble, but I didn't care, all that mattered was him and the way he made me feel. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads pressed together as we clung to each other like lifelines. I could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest, mirroring my own, grounding me in a way I hadn't anticipated. "This is crazy," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Caleb laughed softly, the sound vibrating against me. "Yeah," he agreed, "but I don't care." I looked up at him, searching. Caleb nodded, his expression softening. "That's all right," he said gently. "You don't have to figure it out right now." His words acted as a balm to the anxiety that was clawing at my chest, and I found myself leaning into his touch as his hand moved to my waist. It was a small gesture, subtle yet grounding, making me feel as though I wasn't completely losing control. "We should stop," I said, though the words felt empty even as I uttered them. Caleb tilted his head, his eyes searching mine. "Do you want me to stop?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to assert that this was wrong and that we couldn't continue down this path, but the words failed to materialize. Instead, I shook my head, my breath hitching as his hand tightened slightly on my waist. "That's what I thought," he murmured, his voice low and almost teasing. The moment hung between us, fragile and electric, as if the entire world had narrowed down to this one room and this one decision. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to create distance before it was too late, but my body refused to comply. I was rooted in place, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He leaned in again, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was softer this time, slower, as if he were giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands moving to his shoulders as I surrendered to the magnetic pull between us. The kiss deepened, and I felt his hands slide to my lower back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. My head was spinning, my thoughts a chaotic jumble, but I didn't care, all that mattered was him and the way he made me feel. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads pressed together as we clung to each other like lifelines. I could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest, mirroring my own, grounding me in a way I hadn't anticipated. "This is crazy," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Caleb laughed softly, the sound vibrating against me. "Yeah," he agreed, "but I don't care." I looked up at him, searching. Our gazes would occasionally meet, igniting an undeniable and electric connection between us. Once the meal was prepared, we sat together at the table, sharing a comfortable silence that felt heavy with the weight of our unspoken past. Yet, for once, I found no need to disrupt the quiet with conversation. Caleb's mere presence was sufficient. After we finished our meal, Caleb reclined in his chair, his eyes fixed on me. "Are you all right?" he inquired, his tone gentle and sincere. I nodded, offering him a faint smile. "Yes, I believe so." His eyes searched mine, and for a fleeting moment, I anticipated he might say more. Instead, he returned a knowing smile that stirred something deep within me before he stood to clear the table. Without needing to articulate it, I understood his intentions. He moved closer, and the experience was exhilarating. He was undeniably attractive, and I had fantasized about this moment several times, questioning whether I was caught in a dream. He was exceptional in his actions. And as we progressed further, a brief silence enveloped us afterward. "This changes everything," I murmured, my voice barely audible. Caleb nodded, his demeanor serious yet devoid of regret. "It does," he affirmed, "but perhaps that isn't such a negative outcome." His simple words bore a significant weight, addressing not only our relationship but also the broader implications for our family and the fragile equilibrium we had long maintained. Everything felt altered now, and retreating to the past was not an option. However, as I observed him moving about the kitchen, I realized that perhaps I did not wish to return to what was. A peculiar sense of tranquility washed over me, while circumstances were far from perfect, messy, complicated, and daunting. I sensed that we might actually be all right. The following morning, sunlight poured through the windows, enveloping the kitchen in a warm, golden hue. I sat at the table, cradling a mug of coffee, the warmth radiating into my hands as I sought to center myself in the moment. The events of the previous night continued to occupy my thoughts, a tumult of emotions and sensations that felt both surreal and undeniably tangible. Caleb entered the room, his hair tousled from sleep, dressed in a worn t-shirt and sweatpants. He appeared just as disheveled as I felt, yet when our eyes met, a slow smile emerged on his face. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a wave of warmth through me, alleviating some of the tension in my chest. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice low and gravelly. "Good morning," I replied, my voice softer than I had intended. He retrieved a mug from the cabinet and poured himself a cup of coffee before taking a seat across from me. For a brief moment, we sat in silence, the atmosphere between us comfortable yet charged. The air felt different now, heavier with the weight of unspoken thoughts, yet lighter in a way I could not fully articulate. It was as if an invisible barrier had been dismantled, and while that was daunting, it also felt liberating. Caleb broke the silence. "How are you feeling?" I hesitated, searching for the appropriate words. "I don't know," I confessed. "It still feels strange." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yeah, I understand that." There was a quality in his tone, an openness, a vulnerability, that made it easier for me to express myself. "But it doesn't feel wrong," I added quietly, my eyes lowering to my coffee mug. Caleb reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing against mine. "It's not wrong," he asserted firmly. "It's just us." I looked up at him, my heart racing at the intensity of his gaze. There was no hesitation or doubt in his expression, he meant what he said, and it provided me with an unexpected sense of comfort. Perhaps he was right, this situation was less about right or wrong and more about what felt genuine. We should probably figure out what this means.